Not necessarily, well, I mean, I think that this stands alone, I think, that committee report. That has nothing to do with excavation, that just has anything that the engineer
That's the whole thing.
has involvement in, if he sees that something's not being done in compliance.
I only had the one copy of the printer.
You want a motion on this?
Yeah, I'll entertain a motion on that. But well, let me think about this, because I want to see what everyone else thinks about it. All right, James, that stands alone, I mean, that stands alone, that's something that would need to be done anyway, correct? This has nothing to do with excavation, though.
The way it stands now, the engineer is identifying
Yeah.
enforcement officer for stormwater control issues. He is not specifically designated as someone who can write appearance tickets. So if he identifies a violation, okay, based on his expertise as the engineer, some other department head, such as the building department, would have to write his accusatory instrument and issue his appearance ticket. Okay? The way it stands now,
Right now, if Ralph goes that, well, what it was, if Ralph went out and inspected the site and found that there was not sufficient erosion control on the site and needed work to be, stepped up there, he would send me the report. I would then have to go and issue a violation notice to the contractor on Ralph's behalf for this.
based
That
on,
doesn't,
And
right, that
get him to
doesn't,
comply.
see,
Yeah,
that doesn't make any sense.
Because he's doing everything, if Ralph is saying it's wrong, so Ralph should have the authority to, or the city engineer should have the authority then to issue the violation notice and follow it up with the appearance ticket if the guy doesn't do what he
Okay, that
wants.
makes sense. So yes, I
It's not in there
will,
right now, it's left out.
so I will entertain a motion on this committee report.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Who's on your committee?
You sitting for?
Tony, you're sitting in for,
I'm sitting for, oh, thank you.
you're sitting in for someone.
I want to
Are you sitting there, you're a voting member?
I can, we got six.
Well, we got 6 people
Yeah.
here for 5. Who's sitting in for?
Oh, no, okay, just.
I'm sitting for Rennie then.
Oh, I thought we had more than that now, okay. Okay, on to question, any further discussion, or else I'll call for the vote?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Let me ask you a favor. What do you got, a date? What do you got, a date?
Can you tell me what we're voting on there, is it?
I'm sorry, I'll read it again. Amendment, the one that says amendment section 353 to add section 353-13D, appearance tickets. The city engineer is authorized to issue appearance tickets for violations of this section. And then we're going to renumber the current sections. Since we're putting D in, we're going to renumber to E, F, and G.
Yeah, it needs to be in there, it really does need to be in there.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, around we go.
So are we doing 211-1, is that?
Yeah, we can discuss 211 next.
Look, it
And
has,
we can go back to the other one if we want, or if you think we
I
should.
mean,
well, it seems like 211-1 is gonna be the same thing, because it talks about a excavation requiring a building permit, so I think we're gonna be back to the, right? What's gonna be a requirement and
Well, yeah, I don't know. I guess at any excavation, it does come into play here again.
or any excavation requiring a building permit, any, that comes back to.
But basically what's this is doing, it currently says, discussing the fence, right now it says, how's it worded? Accessible to children, right? And we're just changing to any member of the public.
well, first, it currently reads accessible to children, and we're changing it to any member of the public.
Okay.
We're proposing, okay, we're also clarifying, it currently says, or other excavation or opening containing water, okay, which makes no sense at all, okay, and it's fairly poorly written. What we're saying basically is, an excavation that requires a building permit, okay, and then we're, clarifying that, this applies to any public safety hazard rather than just hazards to children. We're basically taking the statute that's already, in the code and tinkering with it to make it applicable to a wider, to a, wider
See,
variety.
this one is linked to the other one because it says, or any excavation requiring a building permit, but if we're not gonna pass tonight the building permit part of that, then these are kind of linked.
Right, they are.
Requiring a building permit, it's
Excavation requiring a building permit.
Unintended or unguarded without fencing deemed to have.
Well, we're still requiring a building permit. The first one, A1, is requiring a building permit, right?
No, we didn't even.
We didn't vote on that because it said
It's
excavation.
excavation.
And we don't know what that means.
Any open cistern well.
The magnitude of it, the excavation. So now,
I thought we were
we
We're
did,
gonna require building permits, but not to go to the engineering to get referred back to get the building permit. That's the
But then they,
A2 we weren't gonna do. And A1 I thought we were still gonna do.
no, because it says on the bottom there, or excavation in
excavation.
preparation for any, and then it's that.
we haven't
what's-
decided
what's-
what
section
that
is
means.
it excavation.
That would bog down the.
Yeah, but you know what, it really doesn't matter, because it says, or
Yeah, but it's
excavation
the
requiring
building
a
permit. You want
If-
all
if-
excavation to get a building permit, right? I thought that's.
Everyone?
Yeah, to get a building permit, yeah.
Everything?
Everything.
Every last
Right,
thing?
Tom?
Well,
Yeah. Well, they do now pretty much, right? I mean, if you're
Every-
gonna build
The
something.
guy got a building permit.
Every
so that's
day.
what the engineer.
nobody's getting, that's right now, nobody's getting an excavation permit, like to put a garage up. They get a permit to put the garage up. It involves excavation. So I believe with the fencing, we just require then that when they're digging the foundation for the garage, that they have some kind of security fencing up so nobody.
No, we're not talking about that, we're talking about A1 now.
And even A1, like I said,
Still need a building permit.
the ICC right now is the only one that's ever come to me and asked just to dig a hole, which is excavation. That would be just a sole permit to excavate. They want to just dig a hole. They don't want to put a foundation, they don't want to put a building up right now because they don't have the plans for it. I don't have those. So, yes, if anybody just wants to dig a hole, they should be required to get an excavation permit, absolutely. And then depending on the size of the hole, it's gonna go to the engineer, because this is just gonna dig a hole. The engineer's gonna have to, chime in on this and say, well, we want this kind of sediment control, we want this kind of erosion control put up here, and then we'll sign off on it.
But that's for the other one, but
I
as far as the section 211, I think this does stand alone.
211 does stand alone, but I
Oh,
think
yeah,
what
211 stands.
Jim is saying too, I think you can do 172.5 A1. It says, or excavation preparation for any foregoing that they need a building permit. That's what we're gonna say. Now, everybody needs a building permit, even if you wanna dig a hole.
Right.
That's what they're saying.
I
And
mean-
then part two,
Oh,
when
yeah,
you
that's what I'm
get
saying, yeah,
back.
so this is good as is, I'm saying.
And then your paperwork, you could do a building
Yeah, this one
permit
is another A,
/ excavation permit.
Okay,
Not
we'll go
not to
back-
have
we'll go back
too many
to that.
forms, have to cross off building, excavation, because you're
Correct.
gonna inspect both of them.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, if anybody, like I said, they just want to dig a hole right now, to me, that would trigger immediately going to the engineer and making sure that's it. But like I said, to put a shed that I know they gotta dig a foundation for it, because that's excavation, to send that to the engineer, I'm not so sure.
No, but we're gonna take out that second part right there.
That's what's that, but just.
Well, let's get back to the one we're on. We're going back to the beginning here,
So
we
211,
can-
That's because,
Yeah, we can go back to that one, but I wanted to go through these other two first, because I think these are a little clearer and they don't require as much discussion, so. Yeah, we'll go back to
Okay.
the first one we talked about. And, but right now, I just wanted to see, so for the one we're amending, section 211-1, I think that stands alone, and that's fine as it is, I think. I don't think that involves anything with 353, so I think we can look at that one and.
Yeah, which is unintended, unguarded, or without fencing. That's that Dan said, he's just making it, used to be just for children.
Right,
Now it's
children,
water.
just with
That's-
water, now
covers
it's basically
everybody.
anything, yeah.
okay, so I got an 8x10 shed, I dig down 2 feet, it rains terribly and it fills up with water. I need a fence around that? Now I have to go buy, I don't know what that would cost me, but it probably cost me a few $100s to put a fence around that.
you get that
No,
plastic stone,
accessible to members of the public,
it's not that.
open cistern.
that,
Well, to prevent children from falling in the
well,
hole.
that's strong stuff.
Well,
You have to spike it
What
down.
it says, Pat, what it says is which is unattended or unguarded or without fencing deemed adequate by the building safety division. So the building safety division can come out and say, you don't need fencing, because there's no danger.
Public safety.
Okay, it gives them the authority to say, this is a public safety hazard, you need a fence. Which is, again, already in the code, it's just phrased in terms of a danger to children as opposed to a danger to the public.
Which if you did, in your scenario, you don't want to build a fence or dig a hole for whatever, and as water comes and it starts to erode, right? You're gonna wanna make sure it's safe anyway, because if your neighbor comes walking in there, and what Dan's saying, this is not just for children now, if a child comes in there,
Yeah,
now
that's gonna
saying
change.
public safety, anybody can come in there, walk in your backyard or wherever, and fall in. You're gonna wanna make sure that you had a fence or is guarded or whatever it might be, you know? I would think.
Yeah,
And the other change-
because that already exists like that, we're
Right.
just cleaning that one up, that's all the 211, the 211.
And the other change is that it is no longer tied to the accumulation of water. So a hole without water is still a risk.
Right, they can determine that you need a fence around it if you have
Yeah.
a 10-foot hole in the middle of your
You get a
property.
hole in
In
it?
fact, one might say that a hole with water is less of a risk.
I would say,
And that is-
it's called a swimming pool.
not-
Or at least there's something there to break a fall.
So I will entertain a motion for, do I have to read it? We all have it in front of us, right? Or I can read it if you'd like, or we can just jump right to a motion.
I'd love it if you read it.
Want to read it? Okay.
Thank you.
And again, this is already in there, some of the wording, instead of saying children, we added person or something. It shall be unlawful for any person, corporation, association, or partnership to create, construct, allow, or permit on premises owned by said person, corporation, association, or partnership in a place, see why I didn't want to read it?
I did.
In a place accessible to members of the public, any open cistern, well, or other opening containing water or other liquid, or any excavation requiring a building permit as set forth in section 172.5, which is unattended or unguarded without fencing deemed adequate by the building safety division to prevent dangers to the public safety. So again, the key there, I think, is the deemed adequate by the building safety department, so they can make a decision. If you're just putting in a small wall, there's like a 1-foot thing, that you won't need a fence around that, but obviously,
Accessible to members of the public.
right. Well, again, that would be their, that would be their call.
How about a pond for goldfish? Fence around it? No fence around it.
Ask the building safety.
If it's
department.
been there already,
They would have
Fence
the,
around it.
they would have the
You got
authority.
a 1-foot pond that you made in your backyard in plastic bags and cement, and it looks nice, and there's goldfish in there. Do I have to put a fence around it now?
If I worked for the building department, I'd say no, but that's not.
This is gonna make you put a fence around it.
No, it isn't. No, it's still up to the discretion.
The
Fencing
international
be
code,
adequate.
right now, the international code addresses anything deeper than 24 inches as a pool, which required a 4-foot fence, minimum 4-foot fence around it. It's got to be 24 inches deep, it's a pool. So if you put a pond in the back of your yard, and any spot of it is 24 inches deep, you fence the whole pond in, or you fence the whole yard in to keep the public at bay. And then you have to include alarms on the fences, just like if you had an in-ground pool. Or an above-ground pool with a deck that comes right off of your back to the house there, you need alarms on the doors and everything. That's what the code says right now, the International Building Code, and if it's more than 24 inches, requires a building permit and the fence around it.
So how about wetlands, right? So I get a bulldozer, I go clear out the wetlands, now I have a.
DEC's gonna come and get you done.
Okay, so how about there's wetlands behind my house?
Yeah.
Do I need to fence it now?
Are they grandfathered in?
They're not your wetlands though, right?
No, there's not wetlands behind my house, but I know of people who have wetlands behind their homes that fill up with water on a periodic basis.
You're not excavating, Pat.
Are they?
Yeah.
You're not excavating, it's there.
Natural occurring stuff there, we don't cover.
All right. I'm just trying to think of every scenario.
No,
You're gonna have, a little bit of water and a little bit of digging.
Again,
and now it's gonna require a
that's not
fence.
changed, that already exists, so.
And this one says anything that requires a building permit, so for wetlands, you don't need a building permit.
Okay, maybe, all right, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
That's good. You have questions?
It's good, no, that's what we're here for. No one should feel compelled to not say something.
No, that's,
Can I get a motion on this?
Motion.
Do we get a second?
I'm just saying for Rick, I don't want to be second.
Good question.
Don't be
You
scared.
can, you can. He probably would have seconded.
Yeah.
Can I call for the vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, let's go back to the beginning now and see what we want to do with the one that involves section 353. We want to look at 353 more carefully and consider, what some of Tom's concerns are with the engineering and
I think, as we were stating before, I think 172.5 or .5A1, that part of it, I think you can keep in. I think you might have to this table or come back or remove section 2, but I think A1 is good the way it's worded right now. Building permits required. This is this telling you that what's required, right? This is what's required to get the building permits required, except as otherwise provided in this section. Building permits shall be required for any work, must conform to the Uniform Energy Code, including but not limited to this construction, enlargement, alteration, improvement, removal, relocation, demolition of any building structure or any portion thereof, or excavation in preparation for any. So I don't think that
everything
excavation
there exists now,
Correct.
except for the or excavation and preparation for any of the foregoing activities.
Last time we were saying,
So do
you
you
already
think-
have to get it from a building permit anyway.
And it just puts excavation as part of their checklist.
That's why I agree. You just put an exclamation.
I mean, we
need
could-
a building permit now.
And we can always revisit
Two.
the rest and look at the other part of that as far as the engineer. Because I think, well, let me ask you this, Tom, if you're issuing a building permit, do you consult with the engineer on certain cases as of now? Like if something comes up, you say, well, maybe that's an engineering matter, or I'd like to get Ralph's opinion on that. Do you do that now?
Occasionally it is done. I mean, especially with the larger projects. I would like to see the engineer brought in by planning when the site plan is being reviewed, because in most cases with site plan, they deal with stormwater runoff and erosion controls that are part of the site plan that gets accepted. And the engineer should be there, at least so he knows what these plans are.
Is not now?
Yes, it is.
He reviews them, yeah. But he's not there to see that they're implemented right now. This is the problem we have, because now hopefully.
Which is why the proposal, do you want
Yeah.
to jump in?
There are voids, and it needs to be addressed, and there needs to be a concerted effort by both the building department and engineering to work together. There's been a void. It's part of the reason that we have this problem, and that's why it's at least my opinion that with respect to excavation and a building permit, if it's going to be reviewed, it's a fail-safe to ensure that it's done properly. Because Tommy and I have had this conversation before where, he's not the one to be or should be judging excavation, even if it's part of the building permit process. So if he acknowledges that he's not the one, and it should be engineering that should be factored in and weighing with their expertise, why would you not include that as part of it? And if you're concerned about the parameters, then limit the parameters. Let his discretion come into play if he feels, but it should be incorporated at that stage. That's a no-brainer. That
Right,
needs
that's-
to be in there.
Well, that's exactly what we were talking about. We didn't have the problem with the engineering department being involved in the permit process, but then we got into what levels of excavation, like Tom pointed out a lot of examples that he, you know, if it's something simple and it's something that's gonna go before the engineer, you say, I don't need to see that. And if things are gonna sit, like his concern was that things are gonna then be bogged down because the engineer's got a ton of other things, and he's gonna have a stack of permits that may not need his expertise.
Two
That's
things you
where
can
we
do.
got, that's kind of where we're at right now.
Two things you can do. Set it so at a certain depth, it automatically triggers. Or two, give it a certain time period by which a decision has to be made by the engineer, or he has to weigh in by a certain narrow. So if you're worried about it being, you know, bogging down the process and taking too long, then tighten the restrictions on the type of evaluation and assessment that engineering is going to give. The duration and time by which information needs to be provided to the building department so it doesn't slow down the process.
We get that information from the engineer himself.
Excuse me?
We get those parameters from the engineer, right? What they feel, the engineer and Tom would get together and give us a proposal about what they feel would be a trigger for the engineer to get the form or just the building safety department to handle it. So there would be a trigger, like so many feet deep, so many feet close to the house.
Yeah, but again, it's not just
Percent
depth.
of the site.
It could be 4 feet deep, but it's on a cliff or something.
353 currently speaks about land disturbance of over 1 acre, land disturbance of less than 1 acre, okay, and land disturbance of 250 cubic yards. And there are different standards for each of those categories that are dependent on a discretionary call by the engineer. Okay, so that's all there already, okay? All this does is create a referral process where once an excavation permit is requested, that information is forwarded to the engineer, and the engineer says, this is 1,000 acre, you know, this is over an acre, it absolutely requires A, B, C, and D. This is less than 1,000, you know, this is less than an acre, but it requires, you know, more, you know, examination and, you know, more review because of these factors, or it doesn't require anything because it's, you know, a minor, you know, dig project in somebody's backyard that doesn't present any engineering issues
And
or
you're
any
gonna-
stormwater issues. It just puts the onus of making that decision on the person who has the expertise, which is the engineer, rather than expecting the building department to, you know, look at an engineering issue and decide whether or not a threshold has been met. Because they're not qualified to do that. And, you know, the engineer is already identified in the code as the person who's supposed to make that decision.
And if the consideration is the length of time that it would take in terms of delay, then you impose a limit with a determination to be made within 60 days. I mean, within 2 days or 3 days, whatever, so it doesn't bog down the system, if that's what you're concerned with, or if that's what anyone's concerned with.
And you think the council has the authority to set those limits on an employee or department or whatever?
I don't see why not.
Okay.
You know, you can also add to B, just a final sentence that says, the failure of the engineering department to provide a certification within 7 days is deemed unapprovable, which is something that we have in many other sections of the code. It's real simple. If they don't respond within 7 days, you know, they're deemed to have no problem.
What about 3 days?
Well, it could be,
How many projects are gonna get by because?
you know, a project that really needs engineering approval. But like right now, like I said, the engineer's tied up with the Greenkill Avenue sewer project. You know,
5 projects.
if he doesn't have that time to do it, I just don't want something thrown back at me and say, well, I don't have time to look at it, you know, because it went 7 days, it's approved now, because I didn't get a chance to look at it. And it really requires his knowledge more than the building department's knowledge, you know.
Put some statement in unless additional time is requested by the engineering department or something like that. 2 days.
I mean, when I review, like I said, if I get an application in and everything is provided that I need for it, 1 or 2 days, they get their building permit. Okay? Now, if it's gotta go to the engineer, you got one guy, he's got other responsibilities in the city. You know, and like I said, on an average, it's probably about 24 building applications that come past me every month that have some form of excavation involved. So does he have the time to look at 2 more
Do you
dozen
feel it's mostly
papers?
common sense? Or-
Some of it is, I think it is, but then others, you know, you gotta put a new house up. You gotta dig a foundation for it. It's probably gonna require an engineer to set the standards now for erosion control and stormwater runoff, so he's gotta take time to do that. You know, if something collapses and, that's, obviously, you know, you've got priorities. And I just don't wanna tie him down with saying, well, you only got 7 days to work on this, otherwise, we're just gonna grant it anyway.
So you've read the code already, now 353, does that tell you that they can cite them, and then they have to tell them what they need to do to correct it?
That's what it says in the code. If
See,
the-
that's a lot more work too.
Yeah.
I mean,
If
a little
the engineer goes on site, does an inspection, finds problems, he not only has to send a violation notice out citing those problems, but then he also has to send out, including in there, remedies on how to fix the problem. So,
We need to talk to the engineer, see how much time he thinks this is gonna take us. And take him? I mean, do we need to hire another employee for this work?
I think you need some more information.
I would love to have an engineer down the building department to review these things. And I think it's adequate work for them, especially then you could go out and do these inspections. And it wouldn't tie up the single engineer we have for the city, you know, who's got other projects going on that he's involved with.
But having his input is not a bad idea.
Yeah.
And I know that when he went down and did some work recently, it was a quick turnaround.
Yeah.
Between his presence along with follow-up in writing, he turned that around pretty quickly. But obviously, you know, every circumstances can be a little different. But I think to have his feedback, have him weigh in, I mean, I think that would be helpful to all of you.
So that's what it's saying.
All right,
We
let me-
get with them that way.
Let me ask you this then, if we just took out number 2 and just added the or excavation in preparation for any of the foregoing activities as alone, and then, I mean, we can always add a section 2 when we straighten out as far as it being required to go to the engineering department and get him to sign off on it. Would that make sense, to just at least get number 1 in there? Because I think that's all we're doing in number 1 is adding that
I
line
think
about.
so.
Just
And like you said, you always come back to there too. You can always
And
amend
again,
that,
in the meantime, if there's a major excavation project going on that he's not comfortable with, he's gonna consult with the engineer anyway. Looks, Bill Carey wants to dig a 50-foot hole in the side of his yard for no good reason. Can you help me with this?
Right.
So that'll still be in place, but we're still, you know, gonna have the ability to head something off that might be a problem with the engineer. But we're not making everything go to him now until we get more
Can't
information.
you just say approval by engineering is anticipated, is required within 2 days unless otherwise advised?
Yeah, but again, then that's,
Insufficient time.
yeah, but then what if it's a major thing and he didn't have the
Well,
2 days and then.
from the
and then he's-
postmark symbol.
Then it puts it all on the building department and we need his
You can't get there.
but maybe that will be the answer, but I don't think we can answer that right now.
I think, again, just to do A1 is good. We can always come back to 2. There's no hurry on this, all right? As you said before, anything that comes with excavation back down to build the safety, they're gonna say, boom, automatically, engineer has to look at it.
And we can all look at 353 and, because we're all like anxious to look at that now, I know. Right, so we can look at that and we can see, and we can, you know, maybe come up with some kind of compromise where it's not gonna, you know, bog things down for a long period of time, yet give us a protection that if it's something major, that the engineer does sign off on it.
Does Corporation Council see any problem with the word excavation in A1? Do you see anywhere where that could be misinterpreted or exaggerated or undervalued, the word excavation there? Could you guys take a look at A1 for me and see if that word excavation is the proper word for this? I'm a little concerned
I
that
think it just means.
this could be blown out of proportion, or it could be misused. by someone who would,
I didn't say I was misused. Everybody has to, you gotta have a building permit to do anything, regardless if you're putting a pool in, regardless if you're putting an addition on, regardless if you're digging a hole, you're supposed to have a building permit. That's supposed to be in the window for whatever you do in the city of Kingston. Regardless if you put up a wall, you should have a building permit from the city of Kingston. So
Like
regardless of digging a
like
hole,
you said,
regardless of
Tom,
building.
a lot of the things you're
You can actually
permits for,
put a
they're
wall
doing some
down there.
digging, some excavation, it's kind of into the, sort of built into the whole permit process. So it's not just like a separate, where you're just digging a hole.
Guys, I'm done with this yet?
I'm just asking a question about.
No,
word.
Yeah, we were missing your wisdom.
Do you have an idea of a more appropriate word?
No, I'm asking you about what your thoughts are.
Well, obviously, I looked at this and I felt it was appropriate, but I mean, I'm open to suggestions, so if you have a more appropriate word, please share it. I don't know.
Do you see where this word could be taken?
What I see is, within law, codes, statutes, any word can be interpreted any way anybody wants to. We rely on the reasonableness of the people that we employ. I have the utmost confidence in Tom, our building department, our engineering department. I'm not concerned about them abusing, misinterpreting any of the words.
I wasn't talking about that, but.
I don't know how to answer you.
That's a good answer, thank you.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. So if I took out number 2, this committee report would read, amend section 17.5 building permits, A1, building permits required, except as otherwise provided in subsection B of this section, building permit shall be required for any work which must conform to uniform code and or energy code, including but not limited to the construction, enlargement, alteration, improvement, removal, relocation, or demolition of any building or structure or any portion thereof, or excavation in preparation for any of the foregoing activities.
So alteration improvements, right?
Yeah, that's
That's
what
the
we're doing,
reason why
excavation for-
If you're putting up a wall in your house, that's an alteration. Improvement, you're supposed to get a building permit, right? If you put up a wall on your property, that's an
And we
alteration
can look
improvement.
at the rest of that as far as getting the engineer more involved and notified quickly. After that, once we figure out the parameters of what we're talking about with excavation. Does that sound fair?
So that committee report, you're removing section 2 then?
Yes.
Okay.
And I will entertain a motion.
Motion. For Rennie, Scott, sure.
No, that's you. You're not. Yeah, I had to make sure you change your name.
I have.
Don't be falsifying records. Do I get a second on that? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
So you're gonna get back to the sooner or later.
What this will mean now is you can't dig that 50-foot hole in the back of your yard. Unless you get a building permit.
That's right, and that's good. So at least we kind of,
So now
it's got a little bit of a
now we
stop.
find out what you're doing, and now, obviously, that's gonna trigger the engineer to come in, I wanna know what the hell you're doing.
I was just gonna build a 50-foot hole in my backyard.
Tell me what you had. Tell me what you had.
You're gonna bury the
I don't think the neighbors are gonna be, I don't doubt it.
I feel a little lost.
Jimmy Hoff is coming in.
Yeah.
What exactly you did, it sounds like you did, add some language or clarify
For
like
fence?
existing code, are you
We just
still?
added, this is the building permit, we added, for excavation, well, when it goes back around, you're allowed for excavation, that is required.
Thank you. How about that?
Yeah, on that, and then the other one.
You would require a building permit if you're.
So you gotta put some words on it.
Just the word for excavation.
And we just added in the part we omitted.
Dig it? Dig it?
See, we omitted the part that.
You digging a hole? Digging a hole. Digging a hole, all the city.
So that's what I said, for building. Yeah, because this means that we're determining the part. I'm not supposed to listen to these conversations.
Right.
The engineer doesn't, building department doesn't say shit, they should grant that, but.
It's just coming for the front.
I knew this was an old, I
But what this says is that
that's why I wanted to see what this was, you know, I knew this was on it.
So that requires any digging.
Everybody's.
We might, well, we want to. Well, I think,
No, it's not. I don't believe so.
Well,
It's not here.
Bill can be,
I'm not sure.
it could be like, clean this out.
I don't accept police.
Nobody wants to talk about it.
oh, yeah.
Chairman Karen, can we make a motion to close up the meeting?
Oh, I'm sorry, can I get a motion?
Motion, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hillary's fault. She wants to get out. Oh, is that what you said?
Yeah.